Welcome to MetalDisciple.com's Metalheads Podcast. My name is George.
And I'm Buke.
We are here today with Brian Slagel from Metal Blade Records.
How you doing?
Pretty good.
We're doing great today, buddy. Brian, I first have to jump in and start by asking you, as anyone who follows you online like myself, George and I are both avid hockey fans. As anybody who watches hockey and follows hockey knows, you are kind of like the journeyman of the hockey world. When did you first get into hockey? It seems like you've gone everywhere now.
Yeah, I think so at this point. I got into it when I was a kid. Obviously, being from LA, people always ask me, how did you get into hockey? But when I grew up, there were a lot of hockey rinks. It was I grew up in the 70s, and this is when in LA, they started building hockey rinks everywhere. So it became kind of a big thing for a minute. So I got into it then. But I didn't really kind of become fanatical about it until the early 80s when a friend of mine, this is the state of the LA Kings in the early 1980s. So he was doing printing work for the Kings. And instead of paying him, they gave him 2 season tickets. And he never went to the game, so he said, hey, you want these tickets? And I said, sure. And they were like 5 rows up from the ice in the corner, and these amazing tickets. So I just eventually took them from him, and they became my tickets, and that began my complete insanity of hockey.
Were you there when the Kings brought in the Great One?
Absolutely. I was there for every single game that Wayne Gretzky played in Los Angeles.
Man, you lucky guy.
That was amazing.
Like you and I have talked back and forth on Twitter. And by the way, if the people listening to the podcast don't follow you, follow Brian Slagel at Brian Slagel on Twitter. He's absolutely awesome. You've been to, it seems at this point, almost every arena, even though I keep trying to get you to a Caps game here. Where have you been to where one has been the most enjoyable, and where haven't you been to?
Well, I've been to a game in every single hockey city, and I've been to every arena except for the new Buffalo Arena, the new St. Louis Arena, and Raleigh. Those are the only 3 I have not been to in terms of the newer arenas. Best arenas, and I've also been to a million junior games and college games, and you name it. I've been to the World Junior Tournament 6 times. I've been to the Frozen Four, the college hockey tournament 8 times. So yeah, I've been around.
Are Philly fans as bad as they say they are?
I would grade. That's a hard thing to say. The Philly fans are pretty bad. I will give you that. Although they're not as bad now because ever since the ticket sales went up and they built that new arena there, if you're sitting in the right spots, it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. But yeah they're crazy. But I used to be. I don't really hate too many teams. I hate styles of play. I hate boring clutch and grab sort of hockey. So the Minnesota Wild and the St. Louis Blues come to mind right now as teams that I don't like to watch. Yeah, the Habs. Although the Habs can be fun sometimes, but yeah, they kind of play that style. So yeah, I kind of do that. But I used to hate the Flyers. For my entire existence, I hated the Flyers. Yeah. I'm a big Penguins guy, so.
What?
Yeah, but I also love the Caps. So I have a lot of allegiances. I'm the only guy in Los Angeles that likes both the Kings and the Ducks too. So.
Yeah, Ducks have our old coach there, Bruce Boudreau, so...
Yeah, who's great.
I pull for him, too, so that's cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I used to hate the Flyers, and then the Kings all of a sudden traded all these guys that I loved on the Kings, Braden Shen, Wayne Simmons, all to the Flyers, and a couple other guys that I know that I liked went to the Flyers. So all of a sudden, it's hard for me to hate the Flyers now.
Now, on a side note here, talk about hockey. You yourself do a hockey and metal podcast. That's correct, right?
Yeah, I do it with Sean Rourke, who runs NHL.com. I've been doing it for 3 years now. It's called Metal Misconduct. You can go to iTunes and check it out. And we basically talk to athletes who are metalheads, and there's tons of hockey guys, and Major League Baseball guys, NFL guys, MMA, all over the place. It's a lot of fun because you get these guys, and you see. I mean, you guys know you see hockey players interviewed all the time, and they're usually the most boring interviews. Athletes in general are pretty boring, but when we get them on the show and they start talking about music, it's a whole different world. It's really fun.
That sounds awesome. I'm going to be checking that out for sure. That's always nice to hear when there's, athletes that like metal. Whenever we meet any of the Caps, we're like, hey, Alex Ovechkin, what do you like? And they're all into techno Europop. And,
yeah. There's not a lot of players in the metal, but there's a few.
And wasn't it you?
I asked the famous story between George and I. I asked Nick Backstrom, of course, from Sweden, if Backstrom knew my favorite band, Opeth. Of course, he looked at me like I told him who? Yeah, who are you? What was that? But quick hockey player that comes to mind who knows metal. Have you met Dan Boyle?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know he's a huge metalhead, right?
Yeah, I've hung out with him a few times. In fact, he's always wearing a Metal Blade Records shirt.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Which I must say, probably one of the best logos around.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it's a fun logo. We just lifted it from some pirate stuff, but it looks cool.
Do you still own that hockey team?
No, I've been in. I never owned a team fully, but I was involved in a few teams over the years, and in the minor leagues, obviously, and every single one of them has gone bankrupt. So, and I used to also be involved in the Central Hockey League as an investor in the company that owned that, and of course, they've gone away too. So, I don't own anything anymore.
What do you think, and this always comes up among hockey fans, and actually you ask non-hockey fans why they watch hockey, what do you think about fighting, and does fighting have a place in hockey?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I'm an old school guy when it comes to that. I think that the players need to police themselves, because people always ask me, like, well, why do they allow fighting? No other sports allow fighting. Yes, but hockey is the only sport where you carry a weapon in your hand. So if you don't have fighting, then guys are going to get hurt. And I think that you've seen, ever since the instigator rule's been gotten rid of, or given the 2-minute penalty, you have seen I feel you've seen a major increase in stars getting hurt. I mean, Sidney Crosby with the Penguins. When Greg Gretzky was here in L.A., he had Marty McSorley there. And if you even went near Gretzky and breathed on him, you were in trouble. And now a lot of guys don't have that fear, so they can take on the star players. Thus, you're seeing pretty much every star player getting hurt for significant amounts of time. In my opinion, if the instigator rule was not there, and you didn't get a penalty, then I think you'd see a lot of that stuff not be around. So I definitely think it's there, but you also see the writing on the wall. I mean, it's getting out of the game. You see a guy like George Peros, who's not able to play anymore because that role is just gone. Every team needs every guy on that roster to be able to skate and score now. So I think it's kind of just getting out of the game as it is anyway.
Yeah, and plus you see so much with, head injuries and brain injury stuff that, I think that's why they're trying to take it out.
Yeah, I mean, I get that a little bit. We talked about Peros. I mean, he kind of, got hurt in a fight, but rarely do guys really get hurt in a fight like that. But then again, you never know. I mean, you look at guys like Probert and some of these other guys who fought a lot and had problems later on. It's definitely a tough issue. But I guess if you like fighting, you have to go to the Quebec League and watch that.
Okay, so here we sit. Already, the Kings have played 6 games already, sit in second place with 9 points. The Kings, you guys playing a tough Pacific. How do you see the rest of the season playing out for you guys?
Well, I thought that the Kings, Kings never play very well in the regular season for whatever reason. But, they'll be good enough to get into the playoffs. But I think right now it's really a huge question mark with this whole Voynov thing. It depends on how that plays out, because he's by far their second best defenseman next to Doughty. And him not being in the lineup is a massive hole for that team. And not only that, that's a very tight-knit group. And you see a guy do something like that. I don't know how that's going to affect the players moving forward as well. If he does come back, how does that affect it? I mean, that's a really big question mark there. So that really could hurt that team an awful lot. So we have to see where that goes, I guess.
Now, on the side note about King fans, you think non-traditional hockey market. How are the turnout for Kings games now? I know, they've seen Stanley Cup success the past couple of years.
They've been selling out ever since they moved to Staples Center. They've sold out almost every game. I think they're on a streak similar to the Caps, like 400 or something crazy and straight sellouts there. So it does really well. They were smart when they moved to Staples Center in downtown LA, because over the years it's been before Gretzky came here, there was about 6,000 people that went to the Kings games, and then when Gretzky showed up, you had sellouts. Then when Gretzky left, you went back to the 5,000 or 6,000. Then they moved to Staples Center, and they did a lot of marketing to like beach cities and kind of skater kids and all the youth kind of around about 10 years ago, and that's really paid off because every one is sold out now. You can't get tickets.
Now, going back to our Caps here, correct me if I'm wrong. You guys played in an outdoor game last year, correct?
Yeah, Dodger Stadium. Caps.
Yep. Caps this year play at Nationals Park against the Blackhawks. A couple years ago, I was at Pittsburgh at Heinz Field when we played the Penguins, and it was an amazing experience. The NHL has kind of taken it used to be the one time a year Winter Classic used to be the game, the special New Year's Day game. Do you think the league is kind of doing wrong in kind of taking out the outdoor game and kind of making it that 4 or 5 time a year thing now?
I actually don't mind it. I think it's kind of fun. I mean, because they probably never would have done that in LA had we not had 5 or 6 different games. And there's one in San Francisco this year too. So I like that they're doing it. I mean, we'll have to see how long the novelty lasts. I mean, it may stick, it may not stick. But I think it's cool. I think every team should have one game outdoors a year. That'd be fine with me.
I think they're probably doing it to, expand on, the hockey fan base. Hockey needs more to get it out to the masses because, like football and baseball are obviously the bigger sports in America. And hockey is kind of like the second-rate sport that, not as many people are into. And so I think something like this really helps to give it more visibility with a lot more people, perhaps.
Absolutely. I mean, anything they can do to promote the league, they're going to do it. And clearly they're making a lot of money, too, because every one of these stadium games sells out. And that's, anywhere from 50 to 60, 70,000 tickets for one game. So, the owners love that, as does the league. But it's funny. I was talking with some friends of mine last week when this whole Voinov thing happened about how pretty much everybody has said, oh, look at Gary Bettman, what a great job he did. He did the right thing. The NHL knows what they're doing and kind of got all this really positive press. Friends and I were talking, it's like, wow, it would be scary because then the NFL, and I'm a huge football fan, but they've kind of made a lot of missteps lately. And if they're not careful, they're going to tumble down. Just like baseball used to be the national pastime, the biggest sport in America for years and years and years. And then between the strikes and the steroids, it's kind of fallen down to 3. You have NFL 1, NBA 2, and then Major League Baseball is 3rd now. So the NFL is not careful. They're going to tumble out of that spot. We were kind of thinking like, wow, what if the NHL actually started rising up the ranks and became a huge sport? I'm not sure if I'd like that or not.
For those people listening who don't know, Slava Vainov for the Kings, I know I butchered his name, his first name always gets me, was accused of a domestic violence incident the other day, and the league quickly came in and suspended him right away. So that's where we're at there.
Yeah, so I guess I should have explained that more.
No, that's fine. Now, maybe I wanted to, we're transitioning to, talking music here in a little bit, but I just wanted to ask you this, since, you mentioned football and the whole Ray Rice thing and how long Baltimore took. In this current day and age we live in, and how, crimes in general, especially, these crimes against women are getting so much press. Do you, in the position you sit in, Brian, has this kind of changed the way you look at the artists underneath you going forward?
Well, I mean, we've been really lucky over the years where we've had very, very few problems with any artist. We've only had a couple. I think we only had 3 artists in the 33 years we've been doing this ever put in jail at all. So we've been really lucky about that. We try to work with good people. So, and we just in general, the metal community, you don't see a lot of this stuff there. But if you do, these things happen. I mean, clearly our world is very much against that sort of stuff. Any sort of violence, obviously domestic violence is a huge problem too. So, we've always been pretty vehemently against that. And if we were to have anybody we work with do something like that, especially if they get arrested, I mean, that would be the end. We would not work with that person any longer, no matter how many records they sold. So it's kind of interesting that you see this on a sports scale where, these guys have been basically getting away with it for a long time until finally this video came out for the Ray Rice thing. Yeah.
Now, fans here in this DC metro area and Baltimore area, they lined up in droves to, sell back their jerseys to the team and all that stuff. How have Kings fans been reacting to this news?
It's been pretty quiet. I mean, the Kings, even though we talk about them selling out every game, they're not, when you have the Dodgers and all this, talk about some football teams moving here, the Kings aren't huge news. So it's out there, but I haven't, you haven't seen what happened with the Ray Rice thing quite yet here in LA. I'm not really sure I think tonight is the first home game they've played since it happened. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of the response has been so far. But clearly, if you look at social media, every Kings fan is pretty, horrified by what had happened.
Now, my friends and I always talk, no matter what the team is, when I saw, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank, your guy's captain.
Dustin Brown?
Yeah, when I saw Dustin Brown, like I do every team, raising that cup a couple years ago, it gives me goosebumps. Were you actually there for those games when they were raising the cup?
In 2012, I was not. It shows you how much, even though I'm a big hockey fan, it shows you I know nothing about hockey sometimes. I was very much against that team. I thought, because I had heard horror stories about Carter and Richards, and then they traded, I talk about Philly, they traded Simmons and Shen, who I really loved, who I think are great players and had a really great great future with the Kings. They made all these trades, and I just thought that I thought all those trades were terrible. I thought this team is ruined. They've made all these dumb trades. They're not going to do anything. Then lo and behold, here they start marching through the Stanley Cup. And I had scheduled, not thinking that anything was going to happen in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I was scheduled to be in New York right when the finals were, and they went a little late that year too. And then I was leaving for Europe for 2 weeks, basically on the last day. So the only game I went to that year for the Kings was the Kings Devils in New Jersey, Game 5, which they won. Okay. And then they won Game 6, and I was on a plane the next day, so I didn't get to see any of the all the post-game stuff, all the parades, all that sort of stuff. So in 2012, I missed everything. Fast forward to 2014, I went to every Ducks-Kings game. I went to all 5 of the Stanley Cup final games, including the 2 New York games. I went to the parade in Hermosa Beach and all that stuff. So I got to at least do all that stuff in 2014. So
that's awesome. The Kings, just to have you know, will always be my second team now, because over the summer my wife and I welcomed our first child, and I was sitting there in the hospital holding my baby for the first night as the Kings were winning their Stanley Cup.
Ah, nice. Well, congratulations.
Thank you very much for that. So the Kings will always be special, and she'll probably grow up now being a Kings fan.
Well, yeah, I guess it's destiny, right?
Exactly. George and I talked about this last week when you were mentioning Wayne Simmons. When he left the Kings, do you stay a fan of his, or you're like, you play for the Flyers now, screw you, buddy?
No. I remained a big fan of his, and Shen as well. I'm not like a lot of the East Coasters, especially New York fans. Like New York fans are like, I'm only Giants or Jets or Rangers or others, whatever. And that's it. If anybody leaves, I hate them. But I've never been that way. If I like a player and he goes to some other team, I'm still going to like the player. I like the style that he plays. So I'm a huge Alexander Ovechkin fan. Always have been. It doesn't matter where he plays. I'm always going to root for him.
That's because you weren't born in Canada, right? Canada hates him.
Yeah, I know.
God, they hate him. This is going to be a odd question here, but Caps Game Entertainment, Caps Game, they tweet you a lot on Twitter. They play a lot of Metal Blade artists at Caps games and stuff. Do you travel around, and have you noticed a lot of stadiums, since metal is that heavy music and hockey is that hard hitting sport? Where's the most heavy metal arena you've been to?
Well, I haven't been, since I've been to a bunch of Caps games, but I haven't been there since they've been playing the music there. In fact, I went, I want to say 2 years ago. I'm trying to remember, it was 2 or 3 years ago. I actually went with Johan, the singer from Mama Martha's wife, because his wife is a huge Capitals fan. So we went to a couple games there, and they played some metal, but not like it is now. Pittsburgh is really good. The guy that plays the music in Pittsburgh is a huge metalhead. He actually works for a metal record label called Willow Tip. So they're really good. Anaheim is great. They play tons and tons of metal. New Jersey, I'm not sure. I didn't go to New Jersey last year, but they used to have a guy there that played a lot of stuff. In fact, they played on Monomartha, New Jersey before. And Chicago's pretty good. I'm trying to think. There's one, Dallas is good. Yeah, they still come out to the Pantera wrote their theme song, so they still come out to that. So those are all the ones that are pretty predominantly metal.
So I just heard the other day that the Minnesota Wild have adopted Hammerfall's Fury of the Wild as their intro song when they come out onto the ice.
Yeah, somebody did tell me that, and I think that somebody said that they're playing some metal up there as well, so which is kind of too bad because that team is so important.
Brian, we're going to transition here. George has some metal questions for you that we've been putting our heads together for.
Yes, sir.
All right, well, I'm going to fanboy out on you for a second here. I've been listening to Metal Blade music for like 30 years now, so one of my earliest metal memories was in the 80s. I picked up a copy of The Best of Metal Blade Volume 1 on LP.
Nice.
And that was the first time that I ever heard about bands like Slayer and Trouble, Celtic Frost, Voivod, Metal Church, Omen, Fate's Warning. I mean, all these great bands, Warlord, Attacker. I mean, I named my Metal Disciple website after the song Disciple that was on that LP. And I just wanted to thank you for all the inspiration that has given me over the years.
Oh, man, no problem. Thanks for the support. I mean, that's, I'm just ultimately just a fan, and the most fun for me is just turning people on to good music. So that's awesome. Right on.
What are some of the bands that are exciting you to work with right now?
Well, there's a lot of stuff. Obviously, all the big stuff is fun. Monomarth, Cannibal Corpse, Black Dahlia, Between the Buried and Me, all that stuff. But there's an interesting kind of newer sort of scene that harkens back to that early 80s style that these young kids are doing. There's a band that we signed from Salt Lake City, of all places, called Visigoth, Visigoth. And they're young 20s kids, and they sound like they came from 1982, 83. It's Manowar, Metallica, Maiden, Priest, all that sort of style stuff. And I'm obsessed with their new record. There's a song up now on iTunes or Spotify or any of the streaming services of their first single, and then the record's coming out in January. So I'm super excited about that, because there's been a lot of European bands kind of doing that sort of stuff. We have bands like Portrait and Solitude that are doing that kind of old school metal sort of thing, but this is the first kind of US band that I've heard for a while that's doing it, and doing it really well. So, and there's a lot of bands now. There's the whole kind of undercurrent scene, super underground now, but bands doing that same stuff and doing it really well. So I'm kind of super excited about that, because, ultimately I'm a huge fan of that, always have been. So to see these kids who, none of them were even born when the stuff that they're influenced by was coming out is pretty amazing.
Yeah, having been into metal for so long, I've gone through, so many different phases. In the early 80s, it was just, it was metal, and then there was thrash, and then death metal came along, and black metal came along, and there's, so many different subgenres now, and I feel sort of privileged to have grown up through all that and been able to assimilate all these different styles, whereas like some kids today, they only like one style or another. Do you have a particular style that stands out to you, or do you kind of like them all?
I do like everything. I've always kind of, even when I was growing up, I liked everything. I never had if you like Slayer, you can't like Queensryche, or if you like Faith No More, you can't like Metallica, well, all that sort of stuff, So I've always liked everything. But I will say, though, that for my personal taste, if the music I listen to the most is 70s into early 80s metal. Iron Maiden's my favorite band of all time, so I love Maiden, Thin Lizzy, Rainbow, Sabbath, all that sort of stuff is probably my specific style that I love the most. But I do I'll listen to everything. I love death metal, I love black metal, all that stuff I'll listen to all the time. But definitely I would say the that late 70s, early 80s stuff, which is why a band like Visigoth I'm really into, because it's definitely right up my alley.
Can I give you a podcast interview thumbs up for your header image of Rainbow Rising?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
That is awesome.
Yeah, that's my second favorite album of all time.
I just got the promo the other day for the new Job for a Cowboy. Wow.
Awesome, right?
Yeah, that is pretty crazy. I've only gotten about halfway through it so far, but I'm loving it.
Cool. That guitar, that new guitar player they've got is so good, and just musically, those guys are at a really super high level. So it's a fun record. I love the way it came out. I think it's the best one they've done by far. Excellent.
Can I ask you about Voivod? They're one of my favorite bands, and you, of course, released their first album, War and Pain. How did you come around to, how did you discover these guys, and how did that happen?
Just like anything else, somebody had sent me a tape. I knew somebody in Canada. I knew a few people in Canada, but somebody had sent me a tape of this band from Quebec, and they didn't speak any English. So this guy was kind of, I guess, acting as their manager, more or less, and he sent me the demo, and I thought it was amazing. So we put them on a Metal Massacre first, and then right after that, we signed them to a record deal and put out that first record. But they didn't speak any English, and they parted with the guy that I was basically dealing with. So once that happened, they went someplace else. So it was kind of a bummer, because we never were able to really get a hold of them, because they didn't speak any English. So. But a great band, and that's I love. Still, that record is still so good. All the Voivod stuff is amazing, but I still love that first record. It still does really well. We just reissued it with a whole bunch of cool stuff a few years ago too, which came out really nice.
Excellent. If I could also ask you about a couple of bands that I have heard before and that I really got into, and then they just sort of disappeared. One of those bands was Beyond the Embrace. Do you know whatever became of them?
They just broke up. That was one of those things where they did a couple of records, and they were kind of, it's one of those situations where you get young bands and they put out really great music, and then they get out on the road and they realize this is kind of a tough life. I'm not sure I want to do this. And I think that's kind of what happened to them a little bit, is a couple of the guys just didn't really like touring. They were young guys. They were faced with, do I try to do this? Do I get a job? Do I go to work? And they just kind of fell apart, more or less. But I heard that they're trying to come back around again. So we'll see.
Well, that'd be good. Yeah, I saw them on tour with Iced Earth and Trivium, and it was in the Record Theater in Towson here, and it was a very small stage, and if I recall, they had 3 guitar players, and so they were all just kind of cramped and uncomfortable looking on stage.
Yeah, it's too bad because that was a really good band. They had definitely some momentum going, but just kind of fizzled out.
Yeah, I love those guys. Another band I was curious about was Disillusion. Their album Back to Times of Splendor was amazing. I know that their second album Gloria was a little bit different. Maybe didn't come over quite as well with people, but whatever happened to those guys, they were incredible.
Yeah, this kind of the same thing. They just, put out a couple records and just kind of went their separate ways. The band just basically fell apart. One of the guitar players is in, I forget the name of the band. If you could probably look it up online, but he's in a new European metal band that's pretty good. I can't remember the name of it now, but you can check that out. It doesn't sound that much like Disillusion, but it's there.
Okay. So one of my favorite bands of all time is the Fates Warning with John Arch. Do you think we're ever going to hear anything more from John Arch? I know he did the Arch Matthias album a couple years ago. Do you know is there any plans for him, or is he done with music?
No. He's not done with music. He's an interesting guy. One of my all-time favorite singers, and I love those first 3 Fates Warning records. And that Arch Matthias record is absolutely brilliant. That was the only thing I listened to for like 3 months, just over and over and over again.
Yeah, he is one of my favorite singers of all time.
Yeah, but he has horrifically terrible stage fright, like unbelievable. He knows that he can't explain it. He just can't do it. We actually got him to play 2 shows for that album, which was somewhat amazing, and he was great at both shows. But he's kind of back, he's got a kid, and he's got his life. He's got a nice store where he actually makes furniture and all this stuff. So he kind of likes what he does, and every couple of years he'll get out there and he'll do something. But it takes him. He's also a unbelievable perfectionist.
Okay.
So it took him 6 months of rehearsing every single day to get his voice back into the shape that he felt it needed to be just to do the record, and then the same thing for the tour. So it takes him a while. But I know Jim from Fates Warning, who's the guitar player, has been talking to him a little bit lately, and I think that there's going to be some stuff happening. There's definitely going to be another Arch Matthias record. They're talking about some other interesting things too. So hopefully it'll happen. And we'll see how it goes. But I've always been a huge fan. He's a great guy too. It's too bad that he doesn't do more stuff. We beg and plead him all the time. Please do more stuff, please. Yeah,
that was going to be my next question, was whether you thought it would ever be possible to do, they probably wouldn't do a Fates Warning album together because, they still have a singer for that. But if they could do some sort of like Awaken the Guardian, tour, of course, if he's got a stage fright issue, then maybe that won't happen, but that would be killer since I never got to see them.
Yeah, there definitely won't be a tour, but you never know what might happen.
All right. Well,
if I can be more cryptic and vague.
That's cool. That's better than nothing. If you're cryptic and vague, it means maybe I can expect something.
There you go.
Buke and I are both big vinyl fans, and we've been, for at least the last year, been ravenously gathering up all the old vinyl that we could find. And I've been having trouble finding some of the old Metal Blade vinyls, and I was wondering if you have any plans to reissue any of the old albums on vinyl. I know you do new albums on vinyl, but particularly Celtic Frost's Morbid Tales, can't find that anywhere, or Omen's Battle Cry. Is there any chance you might reissue the old stuff?
Yes. Well, what we're doing is we got the rights to a lot of the Roadrunner catalog, so we've been reissuing all that, like all the old Merciful Fate and King Diamond, Deicide, Sepultura, Black Death Angel, tons and tons of stuff. If you go to our web shop, you'll see there's a lot of vinyl on there. And the stuff that you're talking about, the biggest problem that we have with doing more vinyl is that, and this is not just our problem, this is everybody's problem, there are very few places that make vinyl anymore. Everybody's really backed up, and we're doing so much vinyl. Everybody's doing so much vinyl that it just takes forever. Like, if it was up to me, we would do much, much more, but it just physically, you just can't do enough of it. But we did actually hire a new old person, somebody used to work for us that ended up doing some other stuff that's coming back and helping us, because we need more manpower to do all this reissue stuff. Because, like I said, we have all this stuff from Warner Brothers that we're doing, and then we also have the old Metal Blade stuff that we're doing. So like you mentioned, in Battle Cry, it's been out on vinyl a couple times. We have reissued it, and we're going to probably do some more of it as well, maybe in Europe. But you can get. We've done like Flotsam and Jetsam. We've done Awaken the Guardian by Fate's Warning. We've done, we're trying to get back some of that old stuff as much as we can. But it's just a matter of, like I said, actually getting them vinyl made is kind of tough.
Now, at the start of your answer there, you mentioned King Diamond. Can you back me up in how awesome his tour is now?
Amazing. Did you guys go to the show in Maryland?
Yeah, we were at the Silver Spring show.
I was there as well.
Absolutely amazing, wasn't it?
Oh, phenomenal. I've seen it in Europe. On the big, I've seen it in Europe quite a few times on the big festival stages, but seeing it, crammed into these theater venues it's just amazing. And every show is sold out, and it's kind of funny. I was talking to a bunch of booking agents, and it's kind of, this tour is really upped. All the other bands are looking at this tour and how well it's doing in the production, and they're all saying to themselves, like, we got to have more production now. We got to compete here. Yeah, it's amazing.
Brian, that would lead me into my next question. Have you ever been to a walk-in, or I'm assuming you've been to any other big metal festivals overseas, right?
Absolutely, many times.
Us here in the States, when you're at the Silver Spring show at the Fillmore, that or, like Ozfest or Mayhem is the biggest we have.
That's not true. We've got the Maryland Death Fest.
Well, yeah. But, Brian, how is a walk-in or one of those fests when you're getting 70, 80, 100,000 people at a concert?
It's pretty intense. I recommend everybody that's a big metal fan to go over and see at least one of the festivals, a Wacken or a Hellfest or a Download, or there's every country's got several metal festivals. It's really amazing because you have a wide variety of types of music and these huge amounts of fans who are all really into it. There's never any fights. Everybody gets along. It's super mellow. It's a very, camaraderie sort of vibe. It's awesome. And the bands all have a great time. So I love going over and seeing those things. It's so much fun. And everybody over there is really cool. So it's phenomenal. And it really, they've been trying to do stuff like that here. I guess Mayhem's probably the closest thing, but there's not like a singular festival that's like that. I guess, Fun or Coachella or these other ones are kind of like that, except they're not all metal. So,
is it just that the States are too big to try and pull off something like that?
Well, that's part of it. Because we've talked about it ad nauseum with the promoters over there. Because everybody over there wants to try to do it. Why doesn't it work in the States? Why doesn't it work in the States? And I think the first part of it is just geographically, it's difficult. Like when you're doing a Wacken, all those kids go there. Like nobody drives. They're all taking trains and buses and this stuff. And you just don't have that sort of public transportation as much in the States, or a location where a lot of people can get to very easily. So Europe's a little more condensed when it comes to that. But I also think that the American fans just weren't really used to that sort of festival. But now with Coachella, like I said, Coachella, Bonnaroo, Fun, Lollapalooza, all these big singular festivals that do really, really well now, people are kind of into that notion of going to a festival like that. So I think it's just a matter of time before somebody does it right in the right location out here, and it works.
We were just at the Guarbecue for the Dave Brockie Memorial, and we were talking with people there, and we met these two guys from Arizona who drove on a Greyhound for 50 hours to get to the Guarbecue. Is that dedication or what?
That's amazing. That is really amazing. That's awesome. Wow. That's insane.
Yeah, the crazy thing about this fest, just like you mentioned it, is that you have a reunited Emperor, finishing up one stage, and Avantasia will be closing the next stage. Worlds apart, but the fans are going crazy for it, loving it.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. It's just this entity there where people love everything, and if you don't like a couple bands, you just kind of go to the back and hang out. So it works really well, and the fans over there, they kind of tend to love a lot of different stuff too. Maybe that's the reason why over here it's a little tougher. Metallica almost got it right with Orion Fest. I think if they would have made it more of a metal festival instead of kind of being all over the map, it could have worked because they had everything else right. But
have you made it to a Maryland Death Fest?
Oh yeah, I've been there a couple times. Absolutely.
Yeah, but it keeps getting bigger and bigger every year.
Yeah, it's good, man. They, the cool thing about that festival is they bring over bands that you don't normally see here, and that's always a priority for them. They want to bring over bands that don't play America from Europe, which is awesome.
Yeah, George is gonna die if he doesn't make it this year and see Triptychon.
Yeah. Yeah, it should be good this year. I'm pretty sure I'm going to go because I think Primordial's playing, and we have a few bands playing there. It's a pretty good lineup so far that I've seen.
Yeah, I got tickets for the Primordial Day too.
Cool, awesome.
So I'm one of those metal and vinyl collectors who I'm a completionist. I have to have everything. And I used to be able to go to this list on the Metal Blade site that had a chronological listing of all the Metal Blade albums from, the very first one up until the latest. And I used that as sort of a checklist. And I can't find that anymore. Did you guys get rid of that?
No, it's still up there. I think it's not complete either, because I actually was looking at it the other day. I think it's under, I'll look right now and I'll tell you. I believe it's under.
Thank you.
History. Yeah, because
if you're going to go to the answer and go to the source, it can't go any higher than Brian here, right?
I was really disappointed.
Yeah, no, it's still there. It's just there's so much stuff on that site now. I think it gets a little lost. I think if you go to here we go. So you go to the Metal Blade site and you click on releases, and then you click on year, and you can select any year from all the way back to 1982.
Excellent.
And it doesn't show you everything, because it's still, I guess they're still updating it, but it gives you a fairly good perspective of what's going on. So,
speaking about years and stuff, as you clicking through that, I see people tweeting at you all the time, vinyl and releases and stuff. Are there still times when people send you a tweet and you're like, oh, geez, I can't believe we released that? Or, boy, that's an old gem from back in the day. It always makes you smile or something, makes your day.
It's always fun when people start talking about older bands. And, I remember all of it, so I still have all of it. And, every band that we basically comes through Metal Blade has to eventually get approved by me. So I'm pretty good at, especially the old stuff. But, yeah, it's funny now how, for example, I'll give you a couple examples. Like, one of my all-time favorite bands from the Metal Blade days was Cirith Ungol. I was always loved them, and when they were actually in existence in LA, they were so out of the loop that nobody understood them, nobody liked them. They couldn't really gain any traction or anything, and even in Europe and stuff, it just nothing ever really happened for them. But over the years, they've kind of grown into this kind of cult. It's a massive cult thing now, where you see Cirith Ungol shirts everywhere, and people ask me about them. It's kind of funny how now 30 some odd years later, they're way more popular than when they first were out there. And a good friend of mine is this guy Chris Santos, who's he's on that show Chopped on the Food Network.
Yeah,
and he has, in my personal opinion, the two best restaurants in the world in New York City: Beauty and Essex and Stanton Social. And he's a huge metal guy. I actually met him first as a metal guy, and then realized who he was later. But he texted me the other day. He said, "Dude, I'm totally getting back into Anacrusis and Sacrifice."
That's good stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, I was like, wow, cool, man, that's so cool. So I love when people talk about that stuff. It's great.
Sorry about that. When, like George mentioned, not to try and bring the mood down here, but when George mentioned we were at that barbecue earlier in the year, I know you have a history with Dave Brockie over the years. You got anything you quickly want to say about him for your time with him?
Well, one of my best friends, just a phenomenal human being. He was incredibly smart, unbelievably funny. He kind of had a bit of everything. He's a little manic, but most artists are. But I loved working with Guar over all the years. I always loved working with Dave and talking to Dave. And he was just so unbelievably talented, not only as a front man for a rock band, but if you saw him in Holliston, the TV show that he was in, acting was naturally brilliant for him. He was amazing in that show.
It's pretty hilarious.
Yeah, he was on the Dan Patrick Show a lot. He was on that Fox Red Eye channel a lot, and just the personality that he had and the character was. You could put him in any situation, he would be just really amazing, and a really down to earth, super nice, great guy. It's really so sad what happened. And at his, I unfortunately missed the barbecue, but I was at the private memorial right after he passed away. And we were talking, and somebody said the one thing that kind of, because you're like, how could this have happened? He was a smart guy. You wouldn't think he would do anything stupid. And we still nobody really knows exactly what happened. But somebody said we're just kind of talking about what had happened and how could it happen. They said sometimes things that burn too bright just spontaneously combust, and that's like the perfect scenario for Dave. Is like he was just so intense and so high energy that it just eventually he just exploded.
That's great. You have you assuming you've met the other greats who've passed on. You've met Jeff from Slayer, and you met Dio, right?
Of course, absolutely.
Dio is one of a kind, isn't he?
Yeah, one of the nicest guys there's people talk about like who are the nicest people in music, and Ronnie Dio was always number one on the list, along with Alice Cooper, who's also one of the nicest guys in the world, and Slash. Like we talk about like big time rock stars being super super nice people. Those three come to mind. And Ronnie was, I mean, obviously an unbelievably talented singer, but a really really good, down to earth, nice human being as well.
Brian, last one from me. Is there anyone who in the music world or just in general that's still, because if I was to meet you, even talking to me right now, like I told you, I'm still honored. I'm truly honored to speak to you right now.
Thanks, man.
Is there anybody who you still meet you're still awe-inspired and awestruck to meet?
Yes. I'm not really too often with that sort of stuff, but I actually did. I mentioned that the podcast that I do, we actually had a non-athlete but a huge sports fan on the one that's coming up in November. We did it in New York last week, Frankie Bello from Anthrax. And the one guy that still freaks me out, there's probably two people that freak me out, and I've only met them very briefly. One of them is Tony Iommi, of course, from Black Sabbath, just because he's Tony Iommi. But more than anybody else is Steve Harris. Iron Maiden is my favorite band of all time. I worship everything they've done. I think he's the greatest songwriter of all time. And it's funny because I'm really good friends with Bruce and his son and his family. I've become really good friends with Rod Smallwood, and I know the other Maiden guys pretty well.
Would you fly with Bruce?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I want to get on that. I had the opportunity to be on that plane a couple times, and I couldn't. It didn't end up working. I couldn't end up getting there, but I would love to. But yeah, Steve Harris still freaks me out. Frankie was telling us the story about hanging out with all the times he hung out with Steve Harris. I'm like, I hate you, because I've only met him. I interviewed him once for my fanzine in 1981, and he was super nice. And then I only met him. A friend of mine forced him to take a picture with me, like when he was like leaving a after show at one of the Maiden shows. So that's the only two times I've talked to him. And I told these guys a story where I was in Toronto when they were filming Flight 666. They had like an after party because that was the final show of that run. So I was at the after party hanging out with all the people that I know there, and I saw Steve Harris talking to the guy from Sum 41. And Steve Harris had that look of when you're talking to somebody and you want to get out of the conversation desperately, but not sure how to do it. He had that look on his face. I could see that look. And I kind of looked at him, and he kind of looked at me for a second, and I saw it, and I was like, oh man, maybe I should go over there and say something. So I was talking to some people, and I walked around, and I saw him again doing it, and I was like, oh, maybe I should. But then again, in the back of my head's like, what if I'm wrong? And I go up there, and the guy's like, what is this asshole? So I walked right by him, and he like looked at me like, please help me. And I just walked right past him. I couldn't do it. I'm just too intimidated to talk to him. So he's definitely the one guy.
All right. I've got one more question for you as well. Given the state of the music business, what is Metal Blade doing to add value and stay viable in a digital music age where downloading is killing off so much of the music business? And for that matter, is it affecting you as much as, say, the Beyoncés and people like that?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we've been doing this longer than any other metal label by far, and longer than a lot of labels. And I think the one thing that we've done over the years to stay alive and stay successful is that we are never afraid of change. And instead of being afraid of change, I think we embrace the change. And we're really trying to do that now with everything that's going on. People ask me all the time about the whole, illegal downloading, all that sort of stuff. And I mean, certainly it's hurt. And, you can't say that it hasn't affected sales, and sales are a lot different now than they used to be. But there's also an unprecedented access to music that people have that has never happened before. And I think I think there are more fans of music than ever before, and certainly more fans of metal music than ever before. And we're also very, very lucky that the metal fans are unbelievably supportive of us and the artists. So that's really kind of helped limit a little bit the sting, I guess, of the falling sales. But you just have to do things a little bit differently. You have to make sure that you put out quality, great records, because if you don't, there's no incentive for people to buy them. And you have to everything you can do, like whether it's social media, and we've been really big in social media. I think that's super important. And we got into social media really early on, more Twitter follows than any metal label, or more Facebook likes than any other metal label, all that stuff. And we've embraced that and used that to our benefit, and that's been a huge help for us as well. And you just, you try to put out better quality records. You try to put out more bells and whistles with those records, more special editions, these direct-to-consumer things that we do on every record, pre-orders. We try to get a bundle of stuff that's really interesting that the fans like. And all of those things are really good. And then there's other revenue streams out there that have been very helpful, too, that come into play. Like, for example, there's a company called Sound Exchange. And what Sound Exchange does is they collect all the royalties around the world for anything that's not like iTunes or related. So it's satellite radio, podcasts, internet radio, all this sort of stuff. And they collect all the money for that. And it's become a fairly significant amount of money now for both us and for the artists, which is really good. And then even the Spotify stuff, we were very late to the Spotify party, mostly because Spotify was giving the major labels all the money, and the deals they were giving to the independents were not very good. And they finally aligned their deals for the independents the same as the majors. So we've been there, I don't know, our whole catalog's been up there a little over a year. And we found that it hasn't really hurt our sales. It's actually been what they want it to be, which is a separate revenue stream. So in general, we're using all these things as best we can to make things work, and it's working. I mean, the last 4 or 5 years have been 4 or 5 of the best years we've ever had. So
excellent.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, we had a top 10 record with Whitechapel this year on the Billboard charts. I mean, if you would have told me that a band as heavy as Whitechapel would have a top 10 debut on Billboard, you'd kind of be like, what? So it's working.
Excellent. So Buke put out some questions on Twitter to some of our followers to see if they had anything to ask you, and he's got a couple things to ask you now.
All right, cool.
And we're asking these, then we'll let you go.
All right, sounds good.
Adam Templeton asks, was there ever a band signed to Metal Blade that you initially had low expectations for that turned out huge, or vice versa?
That's actually a really good question. There's probably been a few things that you would have thought. I mean, just for example, a band like Armored Saint, we always thought was going to be a lot bigger than they ended up being, unfortunately, for whatever reason. And I could give you a list of 50 reasons, but I always thought they would be a lot bigger. And yeah, there are definitely things that surprise you. I mean, certainly As I Lay Dying, when they first came out, we knew that the band was really, really good, and we liked them a lot, but we didn't know that they were ever going to be as huge as they are. And even a band like Amon Amarth, who started out, their first 3 or 4 records were kind of, good death metal band. They had reasonable sales, and then they just, with Fate of Norns, they just kind of took a bit of a musical turn, and that really kind of exploded it. So, it's always nice to see that sort of stuff. You always have good expectations, but it's nice to see when things really kind of get big. And even, I mean, look, if you would have told me Cannibal Corpse would be as big as they are now when we first signed them in 1990, I wouldn't have believed you either. So.
Sorry, they were just at like 32 on Billboard?
Yeah. But they've sold well over 2 million records in their career now, which is crazy.
Ridiculous.
That's awesome.
And our second and last question here from Dano is, and this is going to make it, this is going to put you up on a high point, buddy. Other than himself, who would be on the Mount Rushmore of metal, non-musician, who gave metal bands their opportunities?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I don't know if I put myself up there, but well, there's a lot of people. I mean, I guess I have to limit it to 3 others. There's 4 people on Mount Rushmore, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's definitely a guy in Germany named Götz Kundemand. He started a magazine over there called Rock Hard that became the largest hard rock and heavy metal magazine in Germany, and had massive, massive influence over what people in Germany bought, and then in essence, what people around the rest of the world bought. Then a guy in Japan named Masa Ito, who is the king of heavy metal in Japan. He's launched a career of every single major metal band in Japan, and had a massive, massive influence on what people, till to this day, what people buy in Japan. He's got radio shows, and he writes for Burn Magazine and a bunch of magazines in Japan. So those two guys for sure. Wow, there's so many others. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to get somebody in the U.S. that I would give credit to. I'll give credit to somebody that kind of doesn't get enough credit as he should. But I'm gonna shout out to Jose Mangan of SiriusXM. He's a funny dude, but I'll tell you, that guy really, even though he's got a crazy personality on the radio, that guy knows his metal big time, and he's been so supportive of really everybody. And satellite radio is a huge, huge influence here in the U.S. on what people are buying, because there is no radio really anymore.
No.
So many people subscribe to that and listen to that channel. You see, if he puts something into heavy rotation, like for example, a band like Battlecross, it's on our label.
He made them.
He made them. I mean, he put them on and really pushed them, and that pushed them to be a pretty popular band. So he's got a lot of power over there, and I think his taste in music is pretty good too. So I'll give him some credit there as well. And I guess the last one we should probably put up there is well, there'll be two little faces up there. But Kevin Lyman, who runs the Warped Tour and Mayhem, and then John Reese, his partner, who really is the one that runs Mayhem. I mean, Mayhem has always been a huge force in helping stuff out as well. So there's
that's awesome. Well, Brian, from my end, I just want to say it's truly an honor, and from the bottom of my heart, a true honor to speak to you. As the hockey season goes on, I'd love to get you back on and talk to you again. Just not even about metal, just talk about hockey.
Yeah, man, anytime. But I absolutely have to get to a Caps game this year. So,
if you go to a Caps game, it would be my pleasure to maybe meet you beforehand or afterhand or at the game.
Absolutely, we'll sort it out
Later, brother.
All right, man. Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Hope maybe we'll see you in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Take it easy.
Take care.
Bye-bye.